What did the pandemic ruin more than we realize? Write what you think about it. How did the pandemic affect your life? Waiting in the comments. Enjoy the show. Story 1. The education and social awareness of a whole generation of young people all around the globe. Ask teachers. A devastating wave of mental illness and accumulated correlated health issues. To me, it was like the Thanos blip. The world has never been the same again, and I find it incredibly stupid not to talk and think about it. Positivism, faith, and good vibes should not stop us from learning from our mistakes. Story 2. The wealth of young people, both mentally and financially. Depression, self-harm, ODs all through the roof. Debt is omnipresent. Everyday things get more expensive. Almost nobody can afford a house, so people end up living with their parents longer. People don't feel like forming a relationship. People don't want or can't afford to have kids. People don't have relationships and stay single. Hell, people that don't have sex is an ever-increasing number, adding to a lot of social frustration and friction. And everything is marketed to that, so you just end up wasting more time and money on something you think you might need. All of this is a festering wound upon our society. It's already smelling bad, but if nothing gets done, we're going to be in big trouble. Our society is declining, and the younger generation is going to have to shoulder the weight of all the trouble. Wealth is with the elderly RN, and being spent on increasingly expensive things nobody else can afford, rather than being spent to solve future problems. And nobody thinks things are worth it anymore. People trusting in the system or being proud of their life or nation is going to drop to an all-time low. The corporations won't care until it's suddenly too late, and the active working population can't keep up anymore. And that's when the ground is going to crumble from under their feet, which results in more layoffs and people losing their job. Golden parachute for the CEO, though, and bailouts for the multinationals, though. Story 3. Town and city centers and gyms. My old gym was a fantastic place to be, and then post-COVID, so many people just gave up and never came back. So many nice restaurants and shops have shut down because of the pandemic as well. Again, because no one comes into the centers anymore as they're either working from home or just don't have the money. Story 4. Capitalism grasp over common people. We are more aware of how much we've been suffering. All this because we had more time to think while we worked from home or didn't work at all. Unfortunately, I think it will not be long-lasting realization. We are slowly returning to modern slavery mode. Story 5. University culture. Dormitories and residences carry a large part of university culture, and a large part of that culture is carried over through contact between juniors and seniors. Without that contact, stories being told, traditions being seen and experienced, the residences need to rebuild their culture from scratch. Story 6. Gaming industry. Tax breaks and funds in COVID time made studios acquire smaller studios and project that is growth. Post-COVID, studios couldn't sustain those smaller studios as games require time to make, so to produce profit for their shareholders, they started laying off artists, devs, and closing down studios. The industry gets ruined. We thought it was a boom leading to bigger things in future, but instead the industry is going for a bust. Story 7. Honestly, in the UK specifically, learning to drive. Before the pandemic, you could pretty much, from start to finish, learn to drive from scratch and do both tests with a bit of dedication in about 3 months. For an automatic, probably a bit more for a manual without needing private practice. You could book a driving test, and they'd be available around 2 weeks in advance, even if you had failed a test. Now, unless you're willing to pay for a £18 app that you hope a bot can book a cancellation for you, or you're willing to pay a scalper £200, £350 for a £62 test, good luck trying to find a test locally within the next 7 months. That's not including the massive surge cost in driving lessons too. Story 8. Trust in government. All politics aside, the idea that we were basically forced to get 2 or 3 vaccine shots in order to keep on with life and get back to work to continue to make money will be forever in my mind. We all had to get injected with something that was a very novel way to fight a virus, wearing masks and protect everywhere to go back to work, for money. Meanwhile, pharmaceutical companies made billions, while a lot of people lost money, work, not to mention family or friends. Was it worth it? I'm not convinced. Story 9. Working from home costs people to not learn skills from their coworkers as easily. Also, people are not networking like they used to. I see people just doing business with the same old people. Money is not transferring to new groups in part due to lack of networking. The rich are getting richer, harder to get a new job, and resulting increase in salary when you personally don't know anyone. Story 10. The lives of people who are vulnerable to COVID, whether it be due to disability or another cause. We've been completely written off as an acceptable sacrifice in exchange for a sense of normalcy as people run around getting COVID over and over again and live unaware of the studies about long COVID that continue to come out. So many things that were accessible to me before the pandemic are now too risky for me to try. I still don't get why the mask mandate went away in medical settings. That's like the one setting where people should always wear PPE because sick people are going there to get treatment, and it's preferable to not spread whatever illnesses patients bring in. In fact, the events of the pandemic have strangely encouraged the CDC to suggest cutting even more corners, which National Nurses United has been pushing back against for quite a while now. It's not like being disabled is a choice. We should at least be able to access medical care safely, but safe medical care is increasingly difficult to find under these forever COVID policies. Story 11. Children's ability to socialize with kids their own age. I teach 6th grade, so they were in very formative elementary years when the pandemic happened. This year's group in particular is so low in their social skills. They have the maturity of 1st graders and, unfortunately, the reading skills to match. They truly don't know how to handle their classmates in any social capacity, and the apathy is extremely concerning. Story 12. Very specifically, fast food. McDonald's was never great food, but it was cheap and fast. Now it's over-the-top expensive, like nearly the same price to go sit down at a chain restaurant expensive. It's a little worse food quality-wise, and it's slow. I can't remember the last time I went through my local McDonald's and actually got my food at the window. I'm always asked to go down away from the delivery window and wait on someone to bring it outside. I don't even get special orders. It's just a damn quarter pounder with cheese. I quit going, and I hate the fact that all of these damn restaurants try to get you to download an app. I'm not downloading a goddamn app for fast food. Just one more place to have my information stolen, sold. Story 13. The bottom 90%. The rich got free PPP, corporations got huge tax credits, my company which never shut down anything got 100M, as did every company, and gave their execs huge bonuses. The rich used these funds to buy up real estate, squeezing the middle class. Retirement savings goals pre-COVID were 1 to 2M for most of my friends, family, colleagues, but now 3 to 4M with the rising coal. Story 14. The Internet. The amount of influencers seems to have tripled, and the amount of original content has plummeted. Trends can be fun, but not when it's the millionth time it's been done, and they aren't capable of making original content. Everyone is on the bandwagon and trying to dropship or peddle something. I will admit that it may just be my filter bubble. Story 15. The way people treat me now. Because I don't socialize much, I'm very socially recluse, and prefer being around animals or alone with nature rather than in public areas or in groups. People assume that I'm depressed without human contact. Just because they suffered throughout the pandemic not being able to socialize, I must be suffering too. I get forced into a lot of social interactions and even yelled at because I don't want to go into the city and meet up with a bunch of strangers I never have done. I'm happy the way I am and always have been. I don't need social interaction, and I'm thankful for that gift. Story 16. The lives and mental health of healthcare workers. We were worked to true exhaustion, praised by some, kicked in the teeth by others. Our supervisors appreciated us, but also needed us to cover more shifts than ever. Those of us who worked in the nursing home industry lost residents who were truly our family members, and we had to sit there and watch them die deaths that were caused by careless people who didn't listen to our rules, our policies, and procedures. We were screamed at by family members, while people were at home playing video games and ordering takeout. We were holding the hands of people who hadn't seen their kids and grandkids in months, were no longer allowed to participate in activities that were crucial to their well-being, all while being told by outsiders how awful we were. And hospital workers had it just as bad, if not worse, around-the-clock shifts, not seeing their own families, many of them living in separate homes, staff shortages, the deaths, my God, the deaths, and again being told, as we watched person after person die, that this wasn't real, that it was all fake. A government conspiracy. Many of us work different jobs now, even though prior to the pandemic, it was our passion and joy. Staff shortages still exist. It's starting to improve in some areas, but I don't know if it will ever truly recover. Story 17. People sucked at driving before. Now it seems they have gotten worse. We had a choice. Those who were freaked out by COVID got to take time off without being charged vacay, or if your job allowed to work remote. Or those of us who didn't much care either way. We went from working 4 10-HR days pre-pandemic to 5 8-HR days for 5 days and 10 days off, which I really loved, plus got hazardous duty pay. The roads were empty, Nobody on the roads. Then they opened stuff back up and holy hell, every car needed a student driver rooftop billboard. Story 18, Immune Systems. It amazes me how most of the population in the US is still just walking around like this. Shit is just a common cold, and herd immunity just magically fixed everything because the government said do. I mean, influenza never goes away, and it kicks millions of people's asses every year and is constantly evolving. Now you got this terrible virus that is way, way worse, mutates very quickly, and has long-term effects, and most people are just like, YOLO. Story 19. Kids relying on sports to get into college. Sure, maybe general financial aid would just take over, but some kids are in that tricky category where their parents may have a higher income but faced with a lot of debt. And obviously some kids rely on their athletic abilities than their SAT scores to get into college. I mean, I went to community college because high school was traumatic for me, despite doing academically well until I skipped school to work. I didn't get my high school diploma, but got my GED with only a few credits short in my senior year. I transferred to a university to finish my undergrad and now have a postgrad degree. So there are other options, but I'm just saying. I talked to coworkers whose children were in high school sports, but all that stopped for them in 2020. I don't know what they ended up doing. Anyone care to share their personal experience? Story 20, University. During COVID, a lot of universities had to record videos going through the course content instead of in-person lectures. But now that we're out of the pandemic, they still insist on using the old pre-recorded content instead of teaching in person. It doesn't feel like I have any connection to the staff here, and they certainly don't know who any of their students are, because they rarely have any contact with us. Makes me wonder what we're paying for half the time, when it feels like I could just be doing the same thing at the Open University. Story 21. Wanting to be around each other in big groups, going to clubs, gatherings, expecting other people to be there instead of just no one showing up at all, because they don't have to. I'm a part of this youth club that used to be so lively pre-COVID, but it's nearly dead now. There are so many people that have joined the Discord, but none of them ever physically come into the building where we meet. You can feel the tumbleweed bounce on by when you show up and no one else does. I do kind of miss it, that community aspect. We're meant to be together as humans, you know? Story 22. The events industry. There were barely any events during the pandemic, and a lot of people lost their jobs and had to completely change careers. After the pandemic, everyone and their mother wanted to make bigger and more expensive events, but there were less people working, so a lot of techs got overworked. Now, we see the reverse of it. The events started to fall off, and companies who hired more technicians after the corona have to downscale. As an example, me and 4 other colleagues got laid off because of big events getting canceled. Story 23. At 28, I almost regret being passionate and working hard and being creative. Ignorance is bliss. Pandemic put me in a lot of situations where I just learned I could arbitrarily be made a bogeyman at any point and be demonized for trying to even help. I now only do stuff and challenge myself for the sake of health. I feel the same shame I did as a little kid for being interested in nerdy and desperately needed skills. I also don't even want to be perceived anymore, the more frustrated and unheard. I seem like a very angry, toxic person on Reddit, and I probably am at this point, but it wasn't until after the pandemic where I no longer share much. Nothing really feels real, and the attention economy has allowed so much intrusion that I don't blame people. The pandemic made me feel a lot more certain of my childhood anxiety about how the future would play out. I think Western society just wasn't nearly as transparent on a lot of things as we thought we were. I think about World of Warcraft and every other person on the forums hyping up how badass dwarves and trolls were and how stupid and gay elves were, and then they're all playing Blood Elf Paladins. Think about guys not measuring their height accurately, but then translated to so many things all at once that tech companies have been able to collect data on that take advantage of societal blind spots and then push and prod at them. The pandemic kind of forced us to have a collective situation where we can see that targeting and manipulating certain demographics to get them to react more and more intensely is not great in community organization and societal integrity. Story 24. Kids' educations. Not only did remote learning leave a bunch of kids behind who didn't have the attention span or support at home to learn remotely, but now there's a ton of kids that refuse to go to school and parents that allow it. I think we basically unintentionally gave a whole generation of kids, and some parents, the impression that education isn't very important. We basically said, well, some people could get sick, so let's just kind of pretend to do school at home for a year or longer since school isn't that big of a deal. And now we're shocked when families are like, meh, I don't care if the kids go to school today. It's not a big deal. Story 25. Socialization and dating. Imagine being 15/16 in 2020, right on the cusp of a teenage social life where a driver's license, dating, and being a normal high school student were right about to happen. Then, you are sent home. Your school is a TV, and you really lose touch with your friends. You lose the critical time to navigate the dating/flirting/chatting skill-building times. Instead, you're left to texting mostly. Then you get in front of someone in real life, and the dynamic is totally different. Instead of being confident in talking to someone, it's awkward, and conversations are less personal and more technical, and lack some of the subtleties of pre-2020. Story 26. The shift in some businesses to work from home has created a shift in before and after work activities. Breakfast commute drive-in business is down by at least 30% in most morning places. Coffee drive-thrus, fast food drive-thrus, etc. Post-work happy hour with office mates has dropped significantly. Bars that may have had a few groups after work every weekday are now only seeing popular meeting times on weekends. Office building vacancies and empty floors buildings. Work from home has changed the feel of businesses, and there's even less of a feel of company loyalty, employee loyalty now, as everyone is pretty much a near stranger anymore in some industries. Story 27. Be honest, pandemic slowly yet quickly fucked up everything on an unimaginable scale, which is crazy how much it really disrupted when you really think about it. Things from store hours, item availability, different careers, jobs, office settings, schools, basic social interactions, etc. Truly a unforgettable, unfathomable domino effect. I mean, that shit really did work like 150M, 250M DPS, like we was the last boss fight on legendary survival settings. Remember, toilet paper almost really could have became a currency, and you'll never be able to just cough like normal in public without someone thinking, oh damn, they got that shit. Story 28. A specialized niche. Almost all churches went to streaming their worship services if they weren't already. This created two larger expenditures that they did not anticipate at all until we had been in the pandemic for at least a couple of weeks. The main expense was for new video and audio equipment and possibly a paid subscription to Zoom, which ended up being horrible for music. The other expense that was either pre-existing or was started early on was a subscription or two to a blanket copyright license service like One License or CCLI. These companies handle royalties to composers for music that churches Xerox or stream for one annual fee. For those churches that are still streaming, like the one I work for, this is an expense that will exist every year as long as they continue streaming. Small churches can't afford this. They already had small budgets and smaller congregations, and there were some churches that just could no longer stay open. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it. Be sure to write comments and share your stories.